Welcome to Rhythms That Restore. I'm your friend Cherisse that's ready to journey beside you. Let's learn rhythms that can restore our minds, hearts, bodies, and spirits, and allow us to walk confidently in who God has called us to be. Are you ready? Pull up a chair. Let's get started. Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the end of May. Oh, deep breath there for all of us. We've done it. And I am so excited for this topic. I need it the most, Allison, as we were just saying, and I'm inviting all of y'all to be a part of this conversation with us today. So for some of the listeners that are listening, maybe you guys this is your first episode, and maybe you saw the title and you were intrigued. So welcome officially to Rhythms That Restore, where we are always exploring ways to restore, rest, and renew our souls in Jesus and His Word. Like I said earlier before, but I'm Cherisse, and today I'm joined by my friend and my special guest, no stranger to the podcast, Allison Bradsher, who is my personal spiritual director. And I've asked her to come today. Allison is with the Retreat House here in Memphis. And as we dive into this topic, there really couldn't be more perfect for the month of May, as we're approaching our summer months, God's divine design for Sabbath. And as women, y'all, we often find ourselves caught in the relentless rhythm of doing. I'll only speak for myself, caring for others, managing our homes, building careers, and trying to maintain some semblance of personal well-being. But what if the answer to our weariness isn't found in better time management or self-care techniques, but in an ancient practice established by God from the very beginning? In Genesis, we see that God Himself rested on the seventh day after creating the world, not because He was tired, but because He was establishing a pattern for us to follow. And He later formalized this practice for the Israelites, not just as a weekly observance, but even insisting entire years of Sabbath rest for the land and for people. And so I know I'm particularly excited for today's conversation because Allison has just returned from a 5-day silent retreat in Lake Tahoe, which she's going to tell us about. I said, Allison, could you please talk about this? She said, okay. And Allison managed to carve out this sacred time of stillness, even with 4 children at home during this busy month of May. So she brings us fresh perspective on what it truly means to prioritize rest in the midst of very full lives. Today, Allison will share her wisdom as both a spiritual director and as someone who has experienced a deep immersion in sacred rest. So we're going to explore what these biblical principles of Sabbath mean for us as women, living in our nonstop culture, especially as we head into summer where routines shift and new demands arise. We're going to look at practical ways to incorporate sacred rest into our lives and discover how embracing Sabbath might be the very thing our weary souls are longing for, even and perhaps especially during the summer months. Oh, we need it so much. And when Allison was here at the Rest Retreat a couple weeks ago, you guys, she helped open up our time for all of us women that were here with this beautiful Be Still prayer. And it's from Psalm 46:10. And I said, Allison, would you help us all just teach us this practice? And this is something you taught it to me, and Brittany did too years ago. And it's been the one anchor when I start kind of feeling like I don't know what to do, and it brings me back. So first, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here and teaching us. I have many questions, and I know Allison and I have been talking about Sabbath for many months now. And so I was excited to dive more into this.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this topic. Ruth Haley Barton says that Sabbath is the kingpin, meaning it is the primary discipline in the spiritual life. So when you look at all the disciplines available to us and all the practices, if there's one that you could really make the backbone that bears fruit and just ripples out, it's that one. And it's one of the hard ones.
I'm shaking my head because I'm like, really? And because it's the one thing we're not doing. We're
Mhm.
not doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting what you said. And then I will do the be still
Yeah.
prayer. But one thing that's so interesting to me is that God Sabbathed. So what does that mean it is? Because God has infinite energy.
Mm-hmm.
God does not need to re-energize. And so what I think God is showing us is that there's goodness and beauty and delight in taking a day to just exist, where there's no doing, where we are just being. We are human beings, not human doings. God is a being, and God even names himself I am, meaning that my name is existence. I am. And that beauty of just existing is what we're invited into, I think, in Sabbath, because we take a day, a week, a month to just exist and to let God remind us that that is where our value is. We're loved, we're valued just in existing. And so it's this reminder, and God tells us, remind yourself that it's not in the doing that you're good, beautiful, valuable. It's in the being, it's in the existing. And I think that's a huge gift of Sabbath, is that reminder.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's interesting that God does it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what does it mean that rest even is? Because God doesn't need to sleep. God doesn't need to, recharge.
But he knows that we do.
Yeah. And he gives us that gift we do need to. And so he gives us that pattern and gives us that reminder of delight in just existing. So,
and he did it from the very beginning.
mm-hmm.
From the very get-go, before anything else happened.
Mm-hmm.
He modeled that.
Yeah. Shows how essential
right
it is if it's like in the groundwork, in the framework, in the building of all things,
Well, to start us off, start us off. If maybe we are all listening in and maybe multitasking while we're listening, or maybe coming from a morning or an afternoon that's been really intense. Can you teach us this one just to kind of lead us into this time?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's important to have these simple ways of practicing Sabbath, because when we talk about bigger chunks, that can feel overwhelming, but we really are gifted moments of Sabbath. And so to take just a few minutes, I think is a beautiful way. So I'd love to start us in that.
Yeah.
So if we could just close our eyes, notice your breath. Really allowing yourself to take a deep breath, to let your breath deepen and soften. Even our breathing can become hurried, short, fast. So in becoming still, you're letting it lengthen. You're letting your whole body soften. As you make yourself available to these words that God gives us from Psalm 46:10, where God says to us, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be.
So beautiful.
Yeah, and even as we go through that, Cherisse, I'm reminded of something that you observed that touched my heart, of how everything about that verse is contained in that one word, be.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can subtract it down, we can drop off a word, and it doesn't lose anything.
Mm-mm.
It's still, the entire invitation is in that one word. So thank you for pointing that out to me at one time.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
It's been interesting too that we were talking about sabbatical, because in the whole Lent series, and we walk through that devotional by Jim Branch called Emptying. And I've been asking myself a lot of those questions, like the process of subtraction, even which is shown in that verse, that again, God can continue to empty us of our selfishness, of our desires, of our stuff, of our schedules. And even if it comes down to the one thing, it's just as powerful as it was at the beginning. And I think that for me, that can be the biggest thing that we're holding in our hands. Like whatever it is that we're holding so tightly onto, maybe as this push-pull of Sabbath or of rest. Why is it so hard for us to lean into rest or to give it up? And so we hold it so tight in our hands when God says, if you just open it up and give it to me, I can do more with less. Yeah. But it's so mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is.
Like my brain cannot wrap around it. Right. And it wrestles.
Right. It feels so opposite to culture and norms and just our natural inclination, which is to think that more is more, that doing more that will increase something. But really in less, God is able to fill that with abundance, you know, and really that abundance of presence when we create a container of space. Because I think one of the reasons that we wrestle with less or sabbatical or Sabbath or whatever it is because we have this deeply ingrained notion that I am what I do, I am what I have, I am what other people say about me. And that's an idea that other spiritual teachers have handed to me, that Sabbath really confronts you with, am I what I do? Am I what I have? Am I what other people say about me? Because when we're in Sabbath, we have to let go of all those things. We have to let go of our work, which gives us a sense of identity, what we do. We have to let go of, if I stop working, what's that going to mean about like my finances or my stuff or my this? We have to let go of I am what I have. And how, if I don't work for this amount of time, what does that mean for other people? What are they going to, coworkers or other people, going to say or feel towards me? So we have to let go of what other people say about us. And all three of those things have a great deal to do with how we find a sense of identity. And so Sabbath is this deep invitation to what is your actual identity, though? And so when we let go of, I am what I do, I am what I have, I am what other people say about me, we're filled with the more of who we actually are, which is God's beloved, that actually doesn't hinge on any of that. It doesn't hinge on what we do, what we have, or what other people think. It hinges on what God says. And so that's kind of the more that fills in when it feels like less. When we're talking about chunks of Sabbath, right? Really stepping away. So.
Right. Those are three things we could have like in an entire hour conversation. I'm just sitting with those. I'm like, yes, but they're real.
Oh yeah.
And when we get down to it, our identity can be tied to all three of those things.
Yes.
Which is false.
Yes. And typically each of us have one in particular that is particularly difficult to let go of. You know, I know for me, it can be, I am what other people think about me. I am how other people are experiencing me. And so Sabbath is actually this giant gift to that very thing, because you're stepping away from other people in a sense, and you're giving yourself a break from always measuring, well, how are they experiencing me? Did they like how I just said that? Or I can tell they were displeased, or I can tell that was frustrating, or you're giving yourself a break from that drive to find your identity in what other people say or think or feel towards you. So in the letting go, it's actually a huge gift, which the other two are as well.
Yeah.
As we let go of I am what I have, we realize that God has provided everything we needed. We lack nothing. And as we let go of what we do, we realize God loves, sees, values, delights in us because he made us, not because of what we do. Anyway.
Some good truth right there. So I know you are joining us and like filled up. So I'm grateful you're pouring all this into me. I'm like, yes, especially after stepping away. And, you know, we have some friends that are listening that they have developed the rhythm and the routine of coming to the retreat house to see you and experience, whether it's a spiritual direction session or they've come and incorporated in having a monthly rhythm of coming to a silent retreat at the retreat house. And so they're like, yes, this is good. I am ready for this. But then we have others that are maybe hearing this for the first time because a friend shared this podcast with them and they're like, this concept of quiet and rest, this is new to me. So let's talk about that a little bit too, that your journey has been not an overnight thing.
Yes.
You have been learning these contemplative practices and practicing this rhythm for many years, just like an athlete does in training for like a marathon, right? And so that's kind of what we would equate this to, is you didn't just start out this way, but you have really been practicing this for a while.
Yes. Yeah. You almost have to grow your capacity like a runner running a marathon. Like you don't go out and run a marathon as much as you go out and run a mile, and then you build on that, and then you stretch a little further and you grow your capacity. And some of these practices, especially if you're incorporating silence and solitude and stillness into that sabbatical Sabbath rhythm, you have to practice and stretch and grow. And so I've been, 10 years of growing my capacity for this. So it is daunting, I think, sometimes to hear somebody say they were in silence for 5 days, or they took a month sabbatical, or they did some of these larger amounts of time, that I would definitely encourage people to start small and do what you can do, not what you can't do. Don't shame yourself for what is not within the realm of reality for you, but step into what your personal invitation is towards a little bit at a time. And I think there's a very simple, like, technology piece to this when it comes to practicing Sabbath and developing like a really straightforward way is to have some Sabbath from your technology. And that can be done in little ways or big ways. And so one of the things that Andy Crouch talks about that I really like, he has a book, The Tech-Wise Family. Have you heard of that?
No.
And he talks about Sabbath technology, Sabbath from technology.
Okay.
And he does 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, 1 week a year. That's his rhythm of Sabbath as related to his phone.
Talk about that again.
So each day he does an hour without his phone.
Okay. Each
week he does a day without his phone.
Okay.
And each year he does a week without his phone.
Okay.
And as he's had, he talks about a family rhythm. So he's got children who do it as well. And so technology, even though, we have so much that we're trying to navigate around technology, it actually can be a pretty straightforward way to Sabbath, because you're just saying, I'm putting it away, and it actually disconnects us from our doing.
That's true.
It disconnects us from what people need from us or think of us. And so it's a really practical, but I loved that. And so that's kind of been, if someone is starting out with like, what is a framework for Sabbath? I really like that one.
I do.
Whether technology related or not, an hour a day a week a year.
That's beautiful. A friend of mine was on a few episodes ago, Linda Tupin, and she was talking about how keeping our faith the most simple thing we can hang on to, because there's so many ways that we can overcomplicate it when Jesus just asks us to come to him and to be with him.
Yes.
And she was sharing about, if we were to be human beings living 100 years ago, how the amount of wisdom and knowledge that they would absorb in an entire lifetime, we can soak up in like a day or a week now.
Yeah.
And so these rhythms of Sabbath, especially disconnecting from technology, are truly crucial. Because our bodies were truly not designed
to take in
what we take in.
No.
And so I think establishing this as the parent or as the woman or man listening, so that you can also be modeling it for those that you're around, is really important.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah. We definitely need it more than ever.
Yeah. And it's again, another small place to start. So whether we're starting with the Be Still prayer and using that as an anchor for a way to start in the morning and maybe end our day.
Yeah.
And then even just putting some boundaries around technology.
Yeah.
That's another, okay, Allison, we can do this.
Yeah.
We can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it took me a minute, but thank you for reprocessing that, because I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I know that there might be friends that are listening that might be thinking, Allison, like, I could never do this with all the responsibilities that I have. And you do. Speak to that real quick, because you have 4 children at home. Yeah. Sure. I was like, or is it 5, Allison? Because sometimes
It's 4.
Tell everybody their ages.
So I have a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and 10-year-old twins.
Yeah.
So it is a full season of life, for sure. And when it comes to bigger chunks of time, that is something that I have to coordinate with my husband. Like it does require a good bit of planning and intentionality.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen. And I think God knows that. Even when God gave this like Sabbath year to the Israelites, God said, I'm going to give you enough the year before so that you're going to have everything you need to Sabbath for a year.
Wow.
And so there was planning on God's part. God prepares in advance. In order to create that kind of space. And whether it's a day, and we have a day of the week where we say, okay, I'm not going to, do these things that I normally do. We have to plan for that the day before or a few days before. So when I go to do, a silent retreat for 3 days or 5 days, and I try to do that once a year, I plan, and I coordinate with my husband, and we make preparations because it is a priority. And so he helps me do that once a year, and I help him do that once a year. And his is different. He does more like backpacking and solitude. It doesn't have to look one type of way, but we help each other figure that out when you have kids.
Yeah.
And we get help from family or babysitters or whatever's needed. But it's because we are helping each other prioritize it. But there's ways to prioritize it, different ways, but it does require planning. If you're talking about being away from your work that makes a certain amount of money, you have to save to do it. Like it's like a intentionality thing that it just doesn't happen. You got to plan.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's perfect. I think that's the answer to this question, but I'll go ahead and ask it too. But what would you say to the woman who feels like any form of true rest is impossible in her current season?
Yeah. Well, I do just want to acknowledge like that everyone's circumstances are different. And to be live in that reality is okay. That it is different for each of us, whether we have kids or don't have kids, what their ages are is different. If we have a spouse that is helping us do it or not, if our work, the financial piece of that or the time off for that, like everyone has different factors that they're working with. And so to say that your way of practicing Sabbath has to look like so-and-so's is a trap, is a bondage.
Yep.
But more the question is, what is God's unique invitation for you? And prayerfully, I do think God does show us pockets of this type of rest and Sabbath. And especially moms of young kids, I've had people ask me like, well, what about when your kids were little? And, I was like, I wasn't doing what I'm doing now when my kids were little.
No.
Every season is different. If I found 10 minutes when they were little and I had 4 little people with tons of needs, if I found 10 minutes to take a deep breath, to allow myself to just exist, to allow myself to remind myself that God sees me in this, loves me in this. I mean, and God took that little 10 minutes and has like expanded it over time. And so you're entrusting yourself to God in that too, that you give whatever little piece you have. And it changes. It changes with different seasons and different circumstances. And, this silent retreat I just went on, a lot of people on it were much older, in their 60s, in their 70s, in their 80s. They're experiencing huge amounts of time for contemplative rest in God. So it really does change season to season, and we can entrust ourselves to that too. But taking a moment to ask God, what is the personal invitation? Where are you showing me that there is a pocket? And mine is just to participate and really step into it and make the plans I can make to step into what God is saying. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Even today, I was walking and thinking of that in the theme of continuing to kind of sit in creating space. And so I've been wrestling with that. Okay, Lord, I'm really wanting to create space and give you this time that I can just show up as myself and be with you. But what I'm really good at is filling the space.
Yeah.
I am like so deep programmed to not ever allow for white space. Like, oh, great. That's a pocket of time. I want to be productive. I want to fill it. And so that, whatever that looks like, even if it's turning on music while I'm walking, I even have been learning it's so hard for me just to be quiet. Like the Lord's inviting me to just listen to what he has to say as I would be showing up to listen with a friend. And he says, I can't say much to you, Cherisse, because you're not quiet.
Yes.
And so just sitting with that uncomfortableness of what is his invitation?
Yes.
And will I allow for it?
Yes.
Or will I take the control?
Yeah. Yeah. Will I allow for this slight shift from my exterior outer life towards my interior inner life? And that's really the gift of Sabbath too. And the gift of some of these practices is giving your interior space a chance to be felt, seen, loved by God, by your own witnessing of your own experience, and so even though listening to music is not bad, it's outer, it's input. It's something from the outside of you that's coming in. And like you said, we're taking in so much all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But we have trained our attention to focus on the exterior, the outer life. And so you do have to retrain your attention to be okay with just the inner life
Mm-hmm.
by letting go of all those outer things and all those inputs. But it is difficult to be with the inner life. And so there is compassion for the ways our attention already goes in these other directions and how difficult it actually is, because when we get still and quiet, yes, beauty and goodness and God's presence is going to rush in, and also hurt, pain, sadness, grief, the things we haven't had time to feel.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was about to go on that 5 days of silence, I was nervous
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know what would come into the space exactly.
Yeah.
And it is a wrestling. It's lovely and it's brutal. It's very hard.
Yeah.
Because it's just not all bliss, because it feels difficult because we have to face some of the inner things
Mm-hmm.
that have been stirring, that sometimes we put in music or we put in this to avoid. Yeah. Not that music is all bad, but anyway, it's hard to be
Mm-hmm.
with God and with yourself
mm-hmm.
in Sabbath. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It makes me think of, we'll hear about people in other countries, like Europeans, like they'll take, I don't even know what is the word for theirs. They'll take like a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just very normal that they will all shut off for a month in the summer. And I think us as Americans are like, oh, we long for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would that even be like? Yet when it comes to us just trying to take a weekend off,
mm-hmm.
or there's so many
Mm-hmm.
Americans that have unused vacation,
mm-hmm.
that they're like, wow, I didn't even use those vacation days.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yes.
And so I think that it is something our soul longs for, this rest, yet we are very unequipped.
Mm-hmm. And collectively, I mean, I feel sadness when you say that, because I'm like, when God designed it, like for the Israelites, the entire culture was doing it. The entire collective society took that year.
Wow.
And so, like you were talking about the Europeans, it is so good when a community can do it together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do feel a certain, like, it is hard. It's hard for us Americans because we are swimming against the current.
Yeah.
It would be much easier.
Right.
And really, as God intended,
mm-hmm.
if we would collectively practice these things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case. It's
mm-hmm.
just not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so how to do it as an individual or as a family in the midst of, it's not the culture,
mm-hmm.
It's difficult. And
mm-hmm.
I think there's extra grace for that.
It is. You touched on it. You were starting to. So keep going a little bit more on that. Like, as far as what is the biblical foundation of Sabbath?
Mm-hmm.
Because some of it, like I'm learning these things. So can you help us understand how God introduces it and this concept in
mm-hmm. Scripture
from creation onward, that reveals both his character and his intentions for us when
mm-hmm.
it comes to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm not a theologian. I'm going to say that off the bat. I don't, I'm not coming in a commentary type of perspective, as more as just an observer of what was God up to in mm-hmm. doing this, and what was the intent. And so there was this year of Jubilee, and it was every 7 years. It's the seventh day in creation. It's the seventh year that the land would rest. And in the year of Jubilee, which I think was actually like at 50 years, all the slaves would go free. Any debt that anybody had was canceled. Jubilee is a celebration of freedom. And to me, it matches this idea that God has, that Sabbath is freedom. Sabbath is a release from bondage. And the bondage we feel to what we do, to what we have, to what other people think about us, is what Sabbath is saying, you're free. You're free from those things. And so when I think about what God intended with these like years of Sabbath, this year of Jubilee, is this invitation to freedom. And the way that he did it for those people was this physical, like, you have to release all your slaves, all your servants, anybody who owes you anything, because you're going to match God's heart in that. God's heart is to cancel debt. God's heart is to free. God's heart is to give abundance to all,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just fascinating to me that God wanted to establish that kind of rhythm and reminder. And I think that's the little invitation inside of any amount of Sabbath that we practice, is you're free. You're actually not bound. This is an illusion that you're bound to your work, to your producing, to what people think, to how much money. That's an illusion. The reality is that you're free in God, And then we do go back into our work with a different motivation, with a way to also image God in creativity, in calling, in being who we were made to be, from this overflow of, like, it's not where my identity comes from.
Yeah.
But it's partnering in God's good work of creativity and goodness and flourishing in the world. So we do then enter back into work, but from a different place.
Right, because we're refueled, we're restored. We've been in his presence, just like when you've been in the presence of any good friend.
Yeah.
You're like, that was energizing.
Yeah.
And so even that visual that you shared with us when you had littles at home and you were like, it was just 10 minutes alone. That can really be restorative to many of us. It might look like lock yourself in the closet for a little bit, right? Just, or quiet time in the car.
And it's not that 10 minutes in a season like that is going to make you feel like 100% rested after a night of waking up with kids. Like, there's a physicality that those seasons are wearying, And so Sabbath rest, yes, sometimes it actually does mean like a nap or ways to refresh your body. But even if it's just a really little 10-minute pocket to be like, my identity is that I'm loved by God. That's the type of like Sabbath thing that we need in any season.
I think you just answered my next question.
Okay.
But I'm going to go back because I want to make sure I'm hearing it right. As far as what do we think that God is trying to teach his people through this practice? So what have you found? But I know that we're all finding it, but what do you think that what other invitation is he asking us? Like, what does he want to teach us about our hearts?
Yeah.
In this practice.
Yeah. I think we do see that our hearts are typically drawn to find our identity elsewhere, that our hearts are typically striving to prove, to feel worthy, to feel loved, to feel validated by other people, to provide for ourselves, that's our natural inclination, and so it confronts us with those things because we have to let those go.
Yeah.
In Sabbath. I also think it just shows us God's heart for being with us. It's that whole Mary Martha thing of like, Mary was just sitting with Jesus.
Yeah.
And there's this woman in Memphis who's a Bible teacher. Her name is Lisa Jensen. She has taught Bible study fellowship for years. And she recently led a retreat that I didn't even attend, but I heard so many people share about this nugget that she said, which is that in the Mary Martha story, that God is inviting us, Jesus is inviting us to center our lives around our priorities versus our demands. And Mary prioritized just being with Christ. And Martha had a overwhelming awareness of all the demands. that were around her. And, we do have lots of demands around us, but Jesus does show us that, Mary has chosen a better portion, which is this being together,
Mm-hmm.
this prioritizing time of witness with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have found that to be really helpful to me to think about, like, there are going to be a lot of demands.
Yeah.
It just is. And I wonder, if there weren't times that Mary did make dinner or do the dishes or do, but her starting place was her priority of being with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And then the demands kind of like probably fell in place around that. And so when I think for myself about establishing Sabbath rhythms, I just try to prioritize it and put it into my calendar, and the demands of life will happen, but to set those priorities of rest and being with Christ first, and then the other things can kind of revolve around that.
It makes me think of two things. One is like the principle of even giving of our time and giving of our talents, treasures, whatnot. None of that ever makes sense. You're planning, like if you're giving right away, as soon as you get paid,
give first.
Yes, you're giving that first, not knowing.
Yes.
And it's also such a step of faith where you're like,
yes,
this doesn't make sense. If I give this, how am I going to have enough to pay my bills?
That's exactly it.
And every time, God's like, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like getting this out of your heart.
Yes.
So I can move and I can provide in ways you would have never imagined. And I feel like he does do that with our time.
Yes.
When we prioritize that time and whatever it looks like, and we just pause to be with him.
Yeah. That's exactly it. It's giving the first fruits of your time.
Right.
And entrusting that gift, which can feel like, whether it's money or time.
Yeah.
But how am I going to have enough? But how am I going to have enough? But how am I going to have enough?
Right.
For all these other things.
Yeah.
But give off the top and wait and see what God does with that.
Right.
Because it's an act of entrusting ourselves to God.
It is.
And this silent retreat I was just on, I learned a lot from somebody named Thomas Keating. And he says, you cannot overdo trust in God. And I thought that is true and hard.
Yeah.
You can't overdo it.
No.
You can't trust God too much. And so to give of that first fruit of time, treasure, talent, money is that little act of like, okay, I'm going to trust that I can't overdo it when it comes to trusting God with these things that feel limited or scarce. It's saying like, that is an illusion. God is abundant,
Yeah. And that God doesn't, he doesn't need us to do anything for him. He invites us to be with him. Right. He's inviting us to experience time with him.
Yes.
That's been a huge thing that I still struggle with.
Yes.
So being able to sit in that truth.
Yes. And ministry work and ministry cultures can be the worst about this, because it's like, well, God wants us to, God needs us to, God, we're doing this for God.
Yeah.
We're all this doing, and it's not that we don't ever give, serve, love.
Yeah.
But God is also inviting us to the not doing and the resting and entrusting those things to God.
Yes. Yes. I think last summer you told me about this book, just a fun book to read. It's called Sensible Shoes.
Oh yeah.
Have you read it?
That's right. You have it. I haven't read it.
Maybe I saw it at the retreat house, but I started reading it, and there was a pastor in there who had served for 25 years and she never had taken a sabbatical. And so her church gave her the opportunity against her will to go on a sabbatical. And she fought it because she said, this is what I do. And this is what I love. And this is how I show you, Lord.
Yeah.
And so it was sitting in that year
Yeah.
of needing to be still with the Lord that she wrestled with so much that for
Yes.
25 years she had pushed down.
Yeah.
And I know of that for us as women, that when we love something and we're passionate about it,
Yes.
we feel like, well, we're not
Yes.
working. You know, I've even heard the quote, like, when you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. But many times God's asking us, like, do you trust me?
Yes.
Do you trust me enough to lay this down?
Yes.
Because there's a lot that you haven't allowed yourself to feel or to think or to process
Right.
because the pace
Yeah.
that you've been moving.
Yes.
And so I do think that there's always an invitation
Yes.
for us to lay it down and to see what God has for us, whether it doesn't matter. We're all guilty of it as women.
Yeah.
Not giving God that full trust.
Yeah. And the humility that it takes to entrust our good work and other people to God. And so like, I meet with people for spiritual direction and decided to take a sabbatical from meeting with people for June and July.
Yeah.
God had put this on my heart for a long time. And I had so many, I don't know. I don't think I could do that because I don't want this person to feel abandoned, or this person just started meeting with me and I don't want them to feel like, well, they just started and now it's over. Or like, this person is going through an incredibly difficult season of suffering. And I'm just going to like leave them in that. Well, what God showed me is like, God is the one with them, walking with each person. Yeah. And when I step back and make space, it is a really important reminder for me and for them that it is God who loves, presences, sustains, encourages, comforts. Otherwise, I can have an overestimation of my own like role, you know? And so Sabbath also reminds me to humble myself and to entrust them to God. That I am not their life source. I am not their life support. Like this practice of spiritual direction can be a gift and it can be a tool and it can be helpful. But God is the one, with or without me. And that verse, teach me to number my days, that's the wisdom, is like, remember that God can do everything God needs to do, with or without you. Your days are numbered and God chooses to cooperate with us and participate with us and use our ministry for good. But we can always Sabbath because God doesn't really need to do that. God can do everything God needs to do through any means. And so we entrust other people to that as well when we Sabbath. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us explore this topic together.
You're welcome.
Wrestle with it.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to have to go back and listen about 3 more times to our episode today, because I do think it is a beautiful question for us to sit with. And speaking of that, is there any other question that you would leave us with as we venture into turning the page to June and sitting with this month of transition? What invitation would you leave for us to just take to God?
Yeah, the question I would encourage each person when it comes to rest or Sabbath is, what am I afraid of? Because for each of us, it's different. Whatever I'm afraid of, and I shared some of that here a second ago, of for that particular Sabbathing, I had fear pop up around, well, what about?
Okay.
You know, and so I would encourage each person to say to themselves and to ask God to help each of us to see, what am I afraid of around rest, around Sabbath, around stepping away from whatever your unique personal invitation is towards this type of Sabbathing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I love it. All right, y'all. Well, you heard our question from Allison.
It's a hard one. It's not that pleasant.
It's a great one, though. It's a great, and we'll just sit with it.
Yeah.
We're going to sit with it And we're going to see, like, Lord, what do you have for me in this new month of June? How can I go forward and be intentional in my rest? What are the pockets that I have? How can I continue creating space for you to move?
And where do I need courage? I think the flip side of that question, what am I afraid of, is like, where is God inviting me to courage? Whether, like we've said, that's stepping into the first fruits idea of time or treasure, like that takes courage.
Yeah.
So
I love it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you for joining me on this journey of restoration and renewal. Remember, you can stay connected with me between episodes by following me on Instagram. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. And if you found value in our conversation today, I'd truly appreciate it if you leave a review on your favorite podcast platform or share the show with a friend who might benefit from these rhythms. Until next time, may you find peace in knowing that you can show up every day simply as you are. And that is enough. Take care.